one of the most innovative games ever made, just disappeared. A series that pioneered cinematic storytelling, influenced the entire platforming genre, and gave us a taste of time control, gone. Prince of Persia wasn't just ahead of its time, it literally bent time. But what started as a masterpiece ended in chaos, confusion, and corporate betrayal. So how did a series this important fade into obscurity, while one of the biggest franchises in gaming stole its crown? This is the untold story of Prince of Persia saga filled with brilliance, ambition, reinvention, and sabotage. From a solo developer rotoscoping animations in his college dorm, to a global franchise with millions of fans, to a forgotten IP left in Ubisoft's vault, Prince of Persia is a masterclass in how to change the industry and how quickly it can all fall apart. We'll take you through the incredible rise of the original trilogy, the bizarre 3D reboot that almost killed it, the comeback that saved it, and the shocking twist that handed its legacy to Assassin's Creed. This isn't just a game retrospective, it's a story about creators, corporations, and what happens when passion collides with profit. So grab your dagger of time, because we're going back. Before Prince of Persia became a franchise, it was just an idea. And that idea came from a 20-year-old film student who had no clue he was about to change video games forever. Jordan Mechner wasn't your typical game developer. He wasn't obsessed with high scores or arcade machines, he was obsessed with movies. He studied film at Yale, but in between lectures and screenings, he was coding games in his dorm room. His first hit, Karateka, already showed flashes of cinematic flair. But it was Prince of Persia that would take everything to a whole new level. What made it different? Everything. Most games in the late 80s were clunky, twitchy, and cartoonish. Mario could only move in stiff arcs. Enemies were one-dimensional. But Mechner wanted something real, something fluid. So, he filmed his own brother running, jumping, climbing, and then traced every frame by hand. That technique, called rotoscoping, gave Prince of Persia animations unlike anything the industry had seen. It wasn't just a game, it looked alive. But visuals were just the start. Instead of power-ups and pixel explosions, Mechner focused on atmosphere and story. The entire game took place in a single palace, no dragons, no aliens. Just a mysterious dungeon, a ticking clock, and a sword-wielding adventurer racing against time to rescue a princess before she's forced to marry the evil vizier, Jafar. No, not that Jafar. Disney's Aladdin came later. In fact, Prince of Persia beat it to the punch by 3 whole years. What really set it apart was the sense of urgency. You had 2 real-time hours to finish the game. No checkpoints, no saves. Just you, your reflexes, and a series of brutal traps waiting to kill you instantly. It was simple, but it was genius. The result? A breakout hit, critical acclaim, huge sales, ports to more than 30 platforms, and a new gold standard for cinematic platformers. But here's the twist. Mechner wasn't interested in cashing in. While other devs would have milked a sequel immediately, he walked away. Just like that. No plans for a follow-up, no blueprint for a franchise. And that decision meant that what came next would be out of his hands. And things would never quite be the same. Prince of Persia was a critical and commercial smash. Fans wanted more. Publishers demanded it. But there was just one problem. The guy who created it had already moved on. Jordan Mechner wasn't in a hurry to make sequels. While Prince of Persia was topping charts and showing up on every gaming platform under the sun, Mechner was finishing his Yale degree, writing screenplays, and working on a documentary that would eventually earn an Academy Award nomination. He was a creator, not a sequel machine. So when it came time to develop Prince of Persia 2, The Shadow and the Flame, the studio had to build it without him. Mechner gave a few creative notes from afar, but the soul of the project, that meticulous storytelling, that cinematic precision, just wasn't there anymore. Instead, Prince of Persia 2 tried to go bigger and weirder. Yes, the graphics were improved, the levels were more expansive, The environments had variety: temples, caves, desert cities, but the storytelling, off the rails. The plot turned mystical and convoluted. Body swaps, evil clones, magical ghost moms, ancient lineages, and a flying horse thrown in for good measure. It was more Final Fantasy fever dream than Arabian fairy tale. Combat shifted, too. Gone were the elegant, one-on-one sword duels. In came wave-based brawls where you could take out multiple enemies at once. It was faster, flashier, but less strategic, and a far cry from Mechner's original vision of graceful, high-stakes encounters. The game still had fans, and it sold reasonably well, but something had changed. The series wasn't building momentum, it was drifting. The SNES version, oddly, was worse than the original. Sloppy ports, stripped content, awkward pacing. It was as if the studio didn't quite know what made the first game special. And worse, Mechner, the creative anchor, was barely paying attention. His prince had become a pawn. Then came the real disaster. By the late 90s, everything was going 3D. Mario made the jump, Zelda reinvented itself. So naturally, Prince of Persia had to evolve too. The result? One of the most forgotten disasters in gaming history. Prince of Persia 3D launched in 1999, and it was supposed to be the bold new chapter that brought the prince into the modern era. But instead of a triumphant leap forward, it was a clumsy, buggy, broken stumble. Developed by Red Orb Entertainment, this version tried to preserve the spirit of the originals. It kept the dungeon crawling, the trap-laden hallways, the sword fights. But once those mechanics moved into 3 dimensions, everything fell apart. The controls were floaty and unresponsive, the camera was completely unreliable, the level design was confusing and full of dead ends. You'd spend more time wrestling with the interface than battling enemies or solving puzzles. The ambition was there, but the execution, brutal. Even Jordan Mechner, who had served as an advisor on the project, distanced himself after release. He later admitted he didn't like the final game, and said it felt like a failed imitation of Tomb Raider without any of the polish. Critics weren't kind, players were confused, sales were underwhelming, and the once proud franchise suddenly looked outdated. Ubisoft, who had just acquired the rights, didn't even try to market it heavily. They saw what was coming. It wasn't just a flop, it was a franchise killer. Prince of Persia 3D was supposed to be the series' grand rebirth. Instead, it sent the prince into a coma, one that would last for years. But, behind the scenes, something was quietly stirring. And it would take a whole new team, a daring vision, and a surprise reunion to bring the prince back from the dead. Prince of Persia was dead, buried by a failed 3D reboot and lost in the noise of newer, shinier franchises. But in the early 2000s, Ubisoft saw potential where no one else did. Not just in the name, but in the legacy, and they were about to make a bet that would change everything. Ubisoft Montreal, a relatively young and hungry development studio, was tasked with reviving Prince of Persia. Their vision? A complete reinvention. Something that paid tribute to the original, but felt fresh, modern, and fluid. Leading the charge was Patrice Desilets, a newcomer with big ideas. But there was a problem. Ubisoft didn't own the intellectual property. The rights still belonged to Jordan Mechner. So they pitched him. They showed Mechner a prototype, a brand new prince, parkouring across palace walls, flipping through sand-filled ruins, wielding a dagger that could turn back time. Mechner didn't just approve, he joined the project, full-time, writing the story, guiding the creative vision, breathing new life into his own creation. The result? Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. A masterpiece. Released in 2003, Sands of Time redefined what a third-person action-adventure game could be. It blended fluid platforming, elegant combat, and an emotional narrative, all framed through the lens of a storyteller looking back on his mistakes. Every mechanic had purpose, every movement felt deliberate, and the rewind feature inspired by Desilets rage-quitting during Donald Duck, going quackers was nothing short of revolutionary. Fall into a spike pit? Rewind. Miss a jump? Rewind. Take a hit that should have killed you? Rewind. For the first time, failure didn't mean punishment. It meant learning. But this wasn't just a game mechanic, it was storytelling. The prince would say things like, "No, that's not how it happened," whenever you died. It created a narrative illusion as if the entire game was a memory being retold, misremembered, corrected. And then there was Farah, not just a damsel, but a real character, a partner, a foil. She challenged the prince, clashed with him, questioned his motives. Their banter felt real. Their connection earned. Sands of Time wasn't just a return, it was a rebirth. And critics noticed. Perfect scores, Game of the Year awards, universal acclaim. The prince was back faster, smoother, and more iconic than ever. But as we've seen before, success doesn't guarantee stability. And this time, the fall would be even stranger. Because with one hit under their belt, Ubisoft decided it was time for the prince to get a dark makeover. The success of Sands of Time gave Ubisoft a clear message. The Prince of Persia was back, but instead of doubling down on what worked, they took a hard left turn into shadows, screaming guitars, and leather armor. In 2004, just 1 year after the elegant fairy tale-inspired Sands of Time, Ubisoft dropped the sequel, Prince of Persia: Warrior Within. And if you've never played it, here's how it feels. The bright palaces are gone. The poetic narration is gone. The whimsical charm, buried beneath blood, rage, and new metal riffs. The prince, once thoughtful and charming, is now brooding, scarred, and angry. He snarls through his lines. He decapitates enemies. He swears vengeance on the monstrous creature chasing him. And yes, that creature is literally called the Dahaka, a time-policing monster bent on correcting the prince's timeline abuse. The soundtrack trades Persian flutes for pounding guitar riffs. The environments are brutalist and grim. The Empress of Time wears less than a Mortal Kombat character. It's not just a sequel. It's a personality transplant. Why the change? Because Ubisoft wanted edge. They wanted to appeal to older teens. To tap into that early 2000s, everything must be dark and violent trend. And to be fair, some things did improve. The combat was massively upgraded. You could dual-wield weapons, chain acrobatic attacks, perform brutal finishes. Enemy variety increased. Boss battles required strategy. For players craving more action, Warrior Within delivered. The level design also introduced non-linearity. You could explore the island of time in multiple orders, traveling between the past and present to unlock paths and solve puzzles. It gave the game a sense of scale and depth that Sands of Time didn't fully explore. But here's the catch. What the game gained in complexity, it lost in soul. The prince's internal monologue was gone, the charm replaced with pure aggression. Farah was nowhere to be seen, and the light, playful storytelling buried beneath growling voice lines and forced edginess. For longtime fans of Sands of Time, it felt like betrayal. The same prince, in name only. A sequel with skill, but no heart. Still, the game sold well. It found a new audience who loved the darker tone and combat focus. But something was already breaking behind the scenes. The creative vision was splintering. And Ubisoft knew they'd gone too far. So for the third entry in the trilogy, they tried to course correct. But by then, the damage was done. Had the prince strayed too far? Could Ubisoft mend the rift they'd created and recapture the magic of Sands of Time? And what would this identity crisis mean for the future of a franchise that had already died and been reborn once before? The story is far from over. Find out what happened next in part 2 of our deep dive into the history of Prince of Persia. We'll explore how Ubisoft attempted to conclude the Sands of Time trilogy, the shocking decision that led to the birth of a different billion-dollar franchise, and the prince's subsequent struggles to reclaim his throne. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it, and let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this era of Prince of Persia. We'll see you in part 2.